CBS News presents Douglas Edwards with up-to-the-minute developments from all parts of the world.
Douglas Edwards, network television's first anchor, the first anchor of this broadcast, was born 100 years ago, July 14th, 1917.
Well, that's it, the last solar eclipse to be seen on this continent in this century. And as I said, not until August 21st, 2017, will another eclipse be visible from North America. That's 38 years from now. May the shadow of the moon fall on a world at peace. And ABC News, of course, will bring you a complete report on that next eclipse, 38 years from now.
An ABC News brief brought to you by Apple Computer. Now from Los Angeles, here's Peter Jennings.
Good evening. Yet another ship has been damaged by explosives in the Red Sea. This time it was a Polish cargo ship which reportedly hit a mine shortly after leaving the Gulf of Suez. A multinational mine-sweeping force has yet to find any mines, so who laid them or exactly what they are remains a mystery.
Just maybe voters are deciding that we can finally leave a candidate's private life where it belongs, in private. And there is something else happening which may be significant. Have you noticed how candidates are using differing tactics to win votes? To put it broadly, some play on emotions and fears while others do not.
40-year relationship you had with Gracie, where you strayed once, and I think got caught.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell it to you. I did.
Good evening from CBS News. This is Newsbreak. President Reagan, in a speech tomorrow, is expected to offer a deal. If Moscow dismantles some of its missiles aimed at Europe, the U.S. will not deploy missiles in Europe that are aimed at the Soviet Union. An all-volunteer armed force seems to be catching on, the Pentagon reporting the best 12-month period since the draft ended. All forces met or exceeded their goals.
I'm Hugh Downs, the host of ABC's weekly magazine called 2020. The program features timely investigative reports on national problems and possible directions for solution, profiles on people that people want to know about, and stories on the arts and sciences and social currents in American life. I hope you'll join us every week for a 2020 view of the world we share.
We, like everybody else, including members of the House and the Senate and the White House staff, organized our coverage and our participation in this quite at the last minute. We really didn't know until not long ago that the President was going to speak tonight. So I give you our apologies, and we hope that you stay with us. We know we're going to have the speech at 9 o'clock.
American preachers tell me that there is no sermon which is looked forward to with less enthusiasm than a sermon about sin. Well, that's probably true if we're talking about a secular sermon on the subject of hard work. There is no gospel less popular than the gospel of hard work.
There's been so much talk in recent years of style and of charisma. No one suggests that either you or your opponent, Hubert Humphrey, have a good deal of it. Have you given no thought to this aspect of campaigning and of leading?
An ABC News Brief brought to you by Ford. Now from New York, Tom Gerald.
Good evening. President Carter, celebrating his 54th birthday, toured the Kennedy Space Center today and presented congressional medals to 6 astronauts. Strategic arms talks between the U.S. and Russia have been adjourned for 3 weeks without the hope for a breakthrough. Senator Kennedy unveiled his national health insurance plan today. It calls for employers to pay for most of the cost for their employees, with the government paying for the poor and the unemployed.
Hello, I'm Harry Reasoner.
And I'm Barbara Walters.
For news that is about you and for you. For news that is continuously on the scene with complete film reports.
For news that is a product of hard work with objective and comprehensive reporting. It's Eyewitness News here on Channel 13, weeknights at 6 and 11, with Dick Burt, Don Alhart, and the Eyewitness News team.
Then join us at 6:30 for ABC Evening News.
And astronauts Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert are making their way through the tunnel to the lunar module, using it as a lifeboat, so they'll have electrical power for their radios on the command module. Apollo 13 is apparently also losing breathing oxygen, and the astronauts may have to use the LEM's oxygen supply. The emergency has ruled out any chance of a lunar landing and could endanger the lives of the astronauts themselves.
An ABC News Brief brought to you by Michelob Light Beer. Now, Ted Koppel.
Good evening. A ragtag fleet of small private boats is continuing to bring hundreds of refugees from Cuba to Key West tonight, and so far the Coast Guard is doing little to stop them. Iranian Foreign Minister Ghosbadeh says if the U.S. tries to block or mine Iranian ports, Iran will blockade the entire Persian Gulf.
This is NBC News Digest. Here is Tom Brokaw, NBC News.
Good evening. President Reagan tonight denied any deal for the release of American hostages.
We did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages.
The president did say the U.S. has been negotiating to restore relations with Iran, to end the Iran-Iraq war, to eliminate state-supported terrorism, and to get the hostages back.
Too often we consider this medium just another method of watching movies and seeing what used to be called vaudeville without having the trouble of going to the theater. But its real value is to make people participants in ongoing experiences. Real life is vastly more exciting than synthetic life, and this is real-life drama with audience participation.
An ABC News Brief brought to you by Sheer Elegance by Legs. Now from Washington, Max Robinson.
Good evening. Interior Secretary William Clark late today removed 3 top aides to former Secretary James Watt. Many areas of the country suffered through another day of sub-zero temperatures. For many, it's the coldest December in half a century. Senator Kennedy today called President Reagan's policies on hunger inhumane, and Kennedy outlined a $2.5 billion program to fight what he called the tide of misery.
The Camel News Caravan presents Today's News Today, produced for Camel Cigarettes by NBC.
Ladies and gentlemen, a good evening to you. The revelation and the admission noted here yesterday that Senator Nixon, the Republican vice presidential candidate, was receiving what amounted to a private salary, an extra salary, from private persons in California, is becoming a major political story.
This is NBC News Digest, sponsored by Sealy Posturepedic Mattresses. Here is Jessica Savage.
Good evening. Secretary of State George Shultz returns to Washington tomorrow after more than 2 weeks away. Schultz participated in troop withdrawal negotiations shuttling all over the Middle East, and he took part in the 24-nation trade talks in Paris. In the Middle East, Schultz got Israel and Lebanon to agree in principle to a troop withdrawal plan, but then Syria said no.
Earlier, the senator asked, upon what meat does this our Caesar feed? Had he looked 3 lines earlier in Shakespeare's Caesar, he would have found this line, which is not altogether inappropriate. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves.
We were like a young band of brothers in those early radio days with Murrow. If my affections are not easily given, neither are they easily withdrawn. I have remained through it all with CBS News, and if it is regarded as old-fashioned to feel loyally to an organization, so be it.
Today marks my official debut, as it were, as moderator of Face the Nation. Our aim is going to be very simple here, to find interesting people from all segments of American life who have something to say, and give them a chance to say it.
A U.S. Navy Board of Inquiry began closed hearings today in Bahrain on the Iraqi missile attack that crippled the USS Stark and killed 37 crewmen. Back in Washington, United States policy in the Persian Gulf was criticized by some members of Congress, but instead of becoming more cautious in the region, the Reagan administration is planning to become more deeply committed there.
Good evening. Official Beirut Radio reports tonight that Syrian and Israeli troops were engaged in a fierce hour-long mortar fight in the no-man's land in the eastern Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. Detroit's Mayor Coleman Young told the National Mayor's Conference in Denver that President Reagan's economic recovery program means increased profits for big business, but no increase in work for the jobless.
Good evening. This is the CBS Sunday Night News. I'm Charles Osgood. Good morning. I'm Charles Osgood, and this is 25 years of Sunday morning. Charles Osgood on the CBS Radio Network.
By agreement between the candidates, the first question goes to Governor Dukakis. You have 2 minutes to respond. Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard.
An ABC News Brief brought to you by Hertz Rent-A-Car. Now from Washington, Charles Gibson.
Good evening. House and Senate conferees reached agreement tonight on a $4.5 billion recession relief jobs bill. They cut more than $1 billion from the bill to avoid a presidential veto. The plan to rescue the Social Security system, meanwhile, is tied up in the Senate in still another fight over the withholding of taxes from interest earnings.
Come this way, Con.
He irritated Lyndon Johnson with his reporting from Vietnam.
Somebody explained to President Johnson that I was a Canadian, and he said, well, I knew there was something wrong with it.
And he enchanted viewers with his signature wit, a wry observer of the human condition, a connoisseur of cultural idiosyncrasies.
We're here in a jury-rigged press room here in George Washington University Hospital in Washington, a conference room, and we're waiting for another medical advisory, which we are told will come sometime around 7 o'clock Eastern Time. The last one we had said that President Reagan was still in surgery. He went in surgery shortly before 4 o'clock for removal of the bullet, presumably, and for repair of whatever damage may have been done to his left chest.
New space policy today saying it would build a new space shuttle. The new policy following the January Challenger disaster does represent a sharp change in direction.
This is NBC News Capsule, sponsored by Lipton Cup of Soup. Here is Edwin Newman.
Good evening. A small private plane flying from Painesville, Ohio to Greensboro, North Carolina crashed today while approaching the airport in Roanoke, Virginia. The 5 people aboard were killed. The International Olympic Committee has ruled that athletes who are paid for competing may take part in the Olympic Games. That is, if the money goes through the athletes' national sports federations and is put into trust funds for them.
This is NBC News Update. Here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. Secretary of State Haig says he's won a pledge from Egypt and Israel to continue the Middle East peace process. Haig also said U.S. arms shipments to Egypt and Sudan will be stepped up due to threats from Libya. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety is recommending that high school driver education programs be abolished and that teenagers be allowed to drive during the daytime only. The Institute says driver training encourages more teens to drive and that night driving is often mixed with drinking.
Peter Blake, the architectural editor of New York Magazine, recommends that all of New York City's town planning work be turned over to the Walt Disney Mickey Mouse organization because they seem to be the only people in America who are able to get anything done. Now, don't laugh. When you look around at this new town they have built here in Central Florida, you will think he is right.
There is in this country, and there has been for too long, an ominous and sickening popularity of hatred. The body of the president lying at this moment in Washington is the thundering testimonial of what hatred comes to and the revolting excesses it perpetrates. Hatred is self-generating, contagious. It feeds upon itself and explodes into violence.
And I said, those are shots. Stop the bus. And then I thought I better find a phone. And the first building that came to that looked as though it might have a telephone was the Texas School Book Depository. I ran up the steps, and as I did, a young man in shirt sleeves came out, and I said, where's their phone? And he said, you better ask inside. And I did. I did a bulletin about the shots being fired, people screaming, and the people lying down on the grass, covering their children with the bodies, people chasing up this grassy knoll and saying it is not known if the shots were directed at the president. Anyway, I ran outside, and a policeman stopped me, and as he did, a little black boy said to us, Mister, I've seen a man with a gun right up in the window there.
I've been laboring in the glories of daily journalism now for 52 years, 36 of them here at the NewsHour and its earlier incarnations. And there does come a time to step aside from the daily process, and that time has arrived.
The commander of this flight is a civilian, Neil Armstrong, 38 years old, from Wapakoneta, Ohio, blonde, blue-eyed, 5 feet 11, 165 pounds, Purdue aeronautical engineer, graduate of 55, 2 sons, Eric, 12, Mark 6, test pilot of X-15s, a naval aviator, 78 combat missions in Korea. Now a civilian, the man who is to put his foot, man's first foot, on the moon next Monday morning.
Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Unemployment. It hasn't been worse since World War II. The Labor Department today said the nation's jobless rate jumped 0.2% to 9% for the month of March. Some 2 million people have lost their jobs since July.
And that's our news. Coming up later tonight on Eye to Eye, my interview with former hostage Michael Durant, and another exclusive, a conversation with Heidi Fleiss, the so-called Hollywood Madam. Eye to Eye tonight. Oh, that was a light that just went out above us. That's all it was. Don't worry. Eye to Eye tonight at a special time. We just wanted to get your attention. A special time tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern and Pacific, 9 Central. See you then.
Hey, folks, it's live television.
That's right.
Connie and I, lights willing, we'll see you again tomorrow here on the CBS Evening News. Thanks for being with us. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
And that's the way it is.